guys, thanks for joining us again today as we look at 2 Samuel chapter 16 all the way through chapter 15. Just a couple of announcements before we get started. Number one, we have another Bible story time with Pastor Eric tomorrow morning at 10. And then in the evening, since it is Good Friday, we have our Good Friday service. That'll be at 6:30 on Friday evening, so please plan to join us then. It's also a great opportunity to share another one of our services. And just remember, as this is Holy Week, we, number one, want Jesus to be on the forefront of our minds, but then we also want evangelism to be on the forefront of our minds. So share these services that are coming up. I believe a lot of people could get saved as we just simply share. We as a church are trying to make it as easy for you to have the open doors with all of your friends to be able to start conversations and then hopefully finish conversations. That if people get saved, the cool part about this is, well, then it's based on your relationship with them. That you have an opportunity to disciple. You have an opportunity to come alongside of somebody who is either maybe walked away from their faith and now will come back, or maybe somebody who is brand new in the faith. Just wonderful opportunities for ministry right now. So I want to encourage you, be proactive. Let's share these services. Let's talk to people about these services. Don't just hit the share button, but call somebody who you think might need to hear about the hope that comes in Jesus. All right. Today we're looking at 2 Samuel 16 to 18, and there's a lot going on. We have some stories that are kind of starting here, and then they'll finish in tomorrow's reading. The first story starts off just like that. We get just the first half of the story with Ziba. He's Mephibosheth's servant. He's originally Jonathan's servant, and Mephibosheth is Jonathan's son, and so now David has restored Mephibosheth to a place within his own kingdom. He has the privilege of eating dinner with the king every day. But his servant Ziba doesn't like this arrangement. And so he goes to David when David is fleeing from Absalom, and he bold-faced lies to him. David asks him, "Where is your servant's son? Where is Mephibosheth?" in other words. And he says, "Oh, he's back at the palace, and he's saying that his family legacy is going to be restored now that you're out of the throne." We know that nothing could be further from the truth. It's a bold-faced lie. And we see two things in this. David then responds and says, "Fine, then all that Mephibosheth has is yours." The first lesson we see is that some people take tragedy and they look for opportunity for selfish gain. And I think of what we're going through as a nation right now. No doubt, there are people out there, there's scammers that are out there right now. There's people who are trying to capitalize on something that is a really bad situation for us. Just be wary of people who are looking to take advantage, especially during difficult seasons for you. That was Ziba. But then, if you are called to leadership, you need to be very on guard of when you make character decisions, when you make decisions that are like what David does here. David is weary, he's on the run, and Ziba comes up to him, and David just makes a judgment call when he shouldn't have. He's exhausted, and he goes, "Fine, I believe you." He takes him at face value, and he should not have. Now, the rest of this story will play out in the later chapters, so we're just going to skip on ahead. From there, David is leaving Jerusalem, and this character who's going to pop up a couple more times throughout the book of 2 Samuel, a guy by the name of Shimei. Shimei comes out, and in this we see something that's a little bit eye-opening for us, and that is that not everybody was a fan of King David. Just like in our day, there was political strife. There were certain leaders that people were fiercely loyal to, and Shimei, well, he was fiercely loyal to Saul, who came before David. And so he comes out, he's throwing rocks at David, he's cursing David, he's saying that he's a bloodthirsty man. And Abishai, one of David's mighty men, says, "Why don't I just go run him through real quick?" And David goes, "No, don't do that. Maybe God has told him to come out and to curse me." And in this we see just the humility of David again. That he's willing as a king to receive criticism from somebody who has no place to criticize him. Rather than be the bully that he could have been and turn and respond to every little criticism that comes his way, he just lets it go. And we see that this is going to come back even again later in the book when Shimei pops up again. But what a wonderful lesson David is for us who are in leadership. You don't have to respond to every criticism, right? Some criticism is very valid. Some only is slightly valid, as it is with here with Shimei. And David just lets it roll right off. What a great example. Well, then it takes us to the palace where Absalom is. And remember, Absalom is being counseled by Ahithophel. Now, Ahithophel was David's old counselor and, once again, remember, the grandfather of Bathsheba. So Ahithophel goes to Absalom and he goes, here's the advice that I want to give. He says to him, what I think you ought to do is you ought to go up to a place where everybody could see and set up a tent where you then take all of your father's concubines and sleep with them publicly. That way everybody will know that you are now the man on top. Now Absalom, obviously in the flesh, loves that idea, and so he does exactly what Ahithophel suggested. But notice his suggestion immediately is sexual. That ought to be kind of weird, I think, to us as the reader. But when you see the background and go, wait, Ahithophel is Bathsheba's grandpa, oh, now we understand. Well, of course, what he's trying to do is get wicked revenge on King David. And so Absalom listens to that advice. Well, then Ahithophel says, then step 2 of my plan is let me go after David. He's on the run. Let's squash him right now while we have the opportunity. Well, then remember the spy, David's good friend Hushai. He went back to the palace. David said, you go back to the palace because then you can thwart the advice of Ahithophel. That's exactly what happens in chapter 17. It stops in chapter 17. Hushai, he comes in and he totally thwarts the plans of Ahithophel. Hushai says, wait, remember, your dad is a mighty man. So instead of going after him right now, as he's enraged, he's like a mother bear robbed of her cubs. He says, instead of going after him now, why don't you have the whole kingdom gathered to you? And then once you have strong enough troops, then you lead the way, Absalom. Now Absalom, I believe in his pride, really liked that advice. So he and the men that are in his court, they reject the advice of Ahithophel and they receive the advice of Hushai. Now, Hushai sends spies out to tell David what's going on. There's a little side story with that. But at the end of that side story, we then see Ahithophel, an old man, a wise man, a man who had at least walked with the king. We don't know his relationship with God, but he at least advised a man after God's own heart for years and years. Well, he sets his house in order, and because his advice was rejected, he goes and he hangs himself. More on that in a second. From there, we go on and we see in chapter 18 that Absalom, he gets impatient. He goes after his father in battle, and there he's riding on a mule. He runs underneath a terebinth tree. And remember the incredible locks that Absalom had, that he would cut it off every single year and it weighed like 1 pound or 2 pounds of hair. He had this great head of hair. And as he's going down, his hair gets caught up in this terebinth tree. His mule runs out from underneath him. And then word gets back to Joab that Absalom is hanging in a tree. And he goes and he thrusts him through with 3 spears. Now in this, we find almost back-to-back stories of 2 men who were hanging from a tree, right? And the first one is an old, wise man. The second one is a young fool. And in this, we see that age does not necessarily equal wisdom. That although Ahithophel was wise for his whole life, he still played the part of the fool in the end. And Absalom, he was a fool his entire life, and yet both have the same outcome. It's tragic when somebody walks with the Lord for a long period of time only to make a terrible fall in the end. Oftentimes that fall is based on bitterness that they have towards a specific individual, and rather than keeping their eyes on the true King, rather than keeping their eyes on Jesus, instead they look to avenge themselves, they look for revenge, they give into lust, whatever it would be. And we see it's such a tragedy when someone who started off so well finishes so poorly. It's equal tragedy to someone who started off so poorly, like Absalom, and then finished poorly. They both have the same end. If the Lord has blessed you with a good start, I want to encourage you, keep your eyes on Jesus and finish strong. Well, then we get this funny story that there's really no application for that I can find. But we have these two guys, Ahimaaz first, the son of Zadok. He asks Joab if he can run with the message and tell David what just happened. And Joab goes, no, just wait. We'll send you when we have news. So then he turns to another character who's not even mentioned. It just tells us that he's a Cushite, and he says to the Cushite, you run and you go tell King David. Then Ahimaaz comes back and he says, please let me run, please let me run. And Joab goes, you don't have anything to say. He's like, please just let me run. He goes, fine, run. And the guy takes off, and we see that he even beats the Cushite to David. And he gets there and he goes, hey David, everything's good. And David's like, what about my son Absalom? He's like, I don't know, because when I had run, they didn't tell me yet. It's almost like Forrest Gump. I just felt like running, right? Like he just takes off. And then David's like, all right, well, then stand here. And so he stands there. The Cushite comes and he says, all right, what's the deal? And the Cushite says, hey, you guys are winning. And then he goes, but what about Absalom? And the Cushite says, oh, may all of your enemies' end be just like that boy, that man. And there, David turns and he begins to weep. And he starts crying. He says, oh, Absalom, my son, Absalom. And then he even says, I wish that it were me who died instead of you. Now, we'll see that this kind of turns against David in the next chapter. But right now, I'd like to pause on that and just see that, again, David is a picture to us of a man after God's own heart, right? He is a picture of Christ. And in this, we see the heart of Christ for you and for me. During this Holy Week, what a thing to remember that Jesus, he took your place. He wanted to die on your behalf, and he did. That while we were still enemies of the king, just as Absalom was enemies of David, so Jesus still loved us, just like David loved his son Absalom. What a good king we serve. What a great week we have in front of us to observe all that Jesus has done for us. All right, God bless you guys. We'll see you again tomorrow, not only for Bible story time at 10, but then again a Devo at 12, and then don't forget that we have service tomorrow at 6:30. God bless you guys, and we'll see you again tomorrow.